Hi, welcome to the History Talks. I'm your host, Will, and this is Sebastian. Sebastian knows a few things about Napoleon. So, Sebastian, can you tell us an interesting fact about Napoleon that most people wouldn't know?
Yes, I can. Most people consider Napoleon to be short, or at least think he is. However, that is not actually true. You see, French inches are different from British inches, and when the news would report on Napoleon's height, they would see the French inches and be like, oh hey, that's British inches. And this, coupled with, political cartoonists and propagandists, wanting to use stuff like Napoleon's height because, that can either make for good humor or to help you promote whatever you're propagandizing.
Okay, so Napoleon got a lot of bad press from his enemies, it sounds like.
Not only that, but I just feel like this is a big insult to Napoleon, because Napoleon was like the main proponent of the metric system.
Oh, really? Okay, I didn't know that he was involved in the metric system.
Yeah, in fact, he created partially as a way to like help unify his empire, because you had French inches, German inches, whatever.
Oh, okay. Plus, I guess the imperial system came from England, and England was one of his enemies, so maybe he had an incentive to come up with a different system.
Yeah.
So, How tall was he? Was he an average
Yeah,
height for his age?
yeah, for his age and for his era, yeah, I believe he was about 5'4".
Okay, and then for a man in the 1800s, I guess that was an average, considered to be an average height.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what about Napoleon's rise to power? What can you tell us about that?
Yes, so he was born in the island of Corsica, which is Italian, like it spoke an Italian language called Corsican. So Napoleon's father, who was a lesser noble, not quite powerful, but technically landowning and noble, he got Napoleon into the French military academy. Napoleon there was made fun of because of his thick Corsican accent. I'm just I'm just imagining like the students at the academy being like, oh, you are the Corsican, you're the Italian, how funny your accent.
You are not nobility like us, you see? You are Corsican.
Yeah. So, anyways, as I was saying, so Napoleon gets through military school, and when the French Revolution happens, he joins the revolutionaries in their army, and one key thing is he avoids factionalism of all sorts, whether that be joining the fact that he did not join the ruling party, the Montgarde, and he did not join any dissident factions either. And other generals may not have been so smart, which opened up some spaces for Napoleon to rise up through, and his avoiding of factionalism allowed him to survive through the Reign of Terror initiated by Robespierre, because especially under the Committee of Public Safety, that was not a very safe time.
So do you think that was a strategic move on his part to avoid factionalism because perhaps he saw what the political climate was like, or was that just coincidental and he just happened to be on the right, or happened to avoid factions just out of pure coincidence?
I believe that it was mostly a strategic move, though from what I can tell, he did not agree with any of the major factions anyway.
Oh, so okay, so it may have been driven by ideology. He simply didn't want to get involved with them because he didn't believe in what they're doing, rather than a specific strategic move to increase his power.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say with early Napoleon, because, like, he has some writings, but at the same time, like, this is, like, a young man who's just rising through the ranks of the French military.
Oh, okay, so how old is he at this time? In his 20s?
Yeah, he's, like, in his early 20s.
Early 20s, okay. All right.
Early to mid-20s, just about.
Yeah, it would just be interesting to know if at that age, when he's 22, 23 years old, if he was strategically planning out this rise or if it just sort of happened,
Yeah.
But maybe like you're saying, there is no information about that. We won't know. So, okay, so he kind of rode this out. There were these battling factions. He kind of stood off to the side and let them battle, and then what happened? A lot of the higher ranking officers were what, killing each other off, and that provided opportunity for him, or how did he start to rise from there?
I mean, what you have to understand about the Committee of Public Safety, which was one of the main revolutionary governments, it was run by Rozier, they were the main guillotiners. They, like, if anyone who was even suspected of being counter-revolutionary, they were executed. That was basically how the Committee of Public Safety was run. That's how Robespierre tried to keep public safety, as he called it. And eventually Robespierre would himself be guillotined.
Okay,
So,
what was the relationship between Napoleon and Robespierre at the time, or is Napoleon low enough ranking that he wasn't even on the radar of Robespierre?
yeah, I don't. Napoleon at this point wasn't on most people's radars.
Okay.
He was almost certainly popular with his own regiments, though it's not really until the rise of the Directory that you see him really become powerful, because
When was that?
the Directory was like the last government before the French Empire, the last revolutionary government.
This is after Robespierre. So during Robespierre's time, he came from this family of lesser nobility. He was a low-ranking officer, so he simply wasn't going to be noticed. Okay.
Yeah.
And then so what happens from there? How does he rise from that point?
Yeah. So eventually he gets promotions until he's like this general. So the Directory, he rises, and they're this government that's basically an oligarchy that lives and runs itself like it's the French nobility, like it's the court at Versailles, except in Paris, and there's no king.
Okay, but they were not born into nobility. These are what, middle class revolutionaries or working class revolutionaries who were able to rise after they knocked off they guillotined all the sort of the aristocracy, the ruling class, and then emulated them.
Or particularly it was like bourgeoisie who had mainly it was people who had like gotten power or through like land acquisitions. So during the government of Committee of Public Safety, they seized a lot of church lands, and the bourgeoisie, as they were called, would like buy up these lands, and they were basically merchants who formed what we would now call the middle class, and they was power to create the Directory.
Oh, okay. So what were these? These were shopkeepers and traders and things of that nature, and then that was essentially who was replacing the old landed aristocracy. Sounds like. Okay.
That is correct. So Napoleon becomes a competent general during this time, and what you have to understand is that none of the revolutionary governments at this point had really taken any successful measure to, take care of the main problem that started the French Revolution, which is that no one can afford to buy bread. The government is in a debt crisis. So the Directory solution, you're never going to believe this, is to declare war on Austria. The logic being, Austria has lots of wealth, and France has lots of angry people.
Okay. So really the strategy there was let's just loot Austria and see what we can get out of them.
Yeah.
Okay. And how did that go?
Well, first of all, Prussia was basically none of the monarchs at this time were very happy with the revolution. Like they were like, oh no, if the people see that they can do this, what if they consider doing it to me? So when France declares war on Austria, Prussia, who had previously been a rival to Austria, is like, hey, we'll join you in fighting the French. So Austria and Prussia counterattack France through the Austrian Netherlands, though they are held back some by competent generalship by the French. And at the same time, Napoleon, under orders from the Directory, invades Italy. He takes over Italy, and he sets up a bunch of republics, which he is a, quote, protector of. They're basically puppet states of France.
Okay, so Napoleon invades Italy. At what rank is he at this point? Is he must have moved up if he's considered the commander, the invader at this point, right?
Yeah, he's one of France's top commanders, generals, whatever you want to call it.
Okay, and how did he get from being, before we were talking about it under Robespierre's reign of terror, he was this lower ranking, maybe regimental leader who was kind of slipping under the radar to now all of a sudden he's a commander in charge of a campaign into a foreign kingdom. How did that happen?
Well, you see, it's a mixture of the fact that like the older generals and stuff had been executed, so that leaves power vacuum. So Napoleon is just like, at first he's just seen like another general who's just taking advantage of this to rise through the ranks.
Okay.
But by the time of the Directory, he's starting to show that he's very competent. He can invade in the entirety of the Italian peninsula. He can inspire his troops.
I see. So that's how he's able to rise. And what age is he at this time?
So this is like
his 30s or late 20s?
Yeah, so this is like his late 20s.
Okay, so he's still very young to be in a position of command like that. But,
yes.
But what allowed him to climb so quickly is a combination of both competence and all the senior leadership essentially being guillotined or just assassinated, and then you have all sorts of openings that he was able to quickly rise into.
That is correct. So Napoleon is super popular after his invasion of Italy, especially in France. Maybe the Italians don't necessarily like being under his occupation, but the French people are thrilled. This guy is the general the Republic needs, and he's so popular that he causes a coup called the Coup of Brumaire, where he overthrows the Directory and gains the title First Consul of the French Republic.
Oh, at this point, when you say he's popular, he's popular with the army, or is he popular with the civilian population as well?
He's popular with everybody, including the oligarchs of the Directory.
Okay.
Because the oligarchs of the Directory are like, hey, he's expanding France, and he at least seems loyal to us.
Okay.
We trust this guy. And
although he comes back to overthrow them.
Yeah,
Okay, so he's got the army. He has the respect of the army. They like him because he's a successful commander. He has the directory or directorate. Directory.
They're called the Directory in English.
The directory, okay.
In the original French, they were called le directoire.
Le directoire.
Le directoire.
I'll call them a director.
Yeah.
So he has the directory on his side because he's doing all sorts of expansion, obtaining land and wealth that they now have control over, and they believe he's loyal. And they must have had some sort of skepticism. I mean, they lived in this time where basically you had all these people getting knocked off,
yeah,
and everybody's just rising to power, and they're all fighting to get to the top. So there's no stability at all. So they must have had some sort of, I would think somebody in that environment would have some kind of idea that, hey, I just got into this position of power. Somebody else saw me rise. They might decide to come knock me off tomorrow. But anyway, it sounds like somehow he got into their favor because he was carrying out their aims. And then what about just the general population? The civilians they're not involved in the directory, they're not in the army, they're just the people, the farmers and things like that. How did they feel? Were they not involved in this, or did they like Napoleon too?
I mean, the people who were had enough food to like think about things usually were in support of Napoleon. He was a war hero, like the kind of person that, like, let's say if he were in the 60s, they would put his based on posters. Back in the 1800s, people are just like, hey, yeah, there's this Napoleon guy. He's doing good things for France.
Okay, so they like him because he brings glory to the French people. That's how they see it. Okay, and he's bringing it to the people rather than just glory to the king. I'm assuming because at this point there's no king.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the entire point of the Jacobins.
Okay. Okay. So what happens from there? So he goes. He does all these military campaigns. He's very successful. He comes back, stages a coup and overthrows the directory. Names himself first consul. Is that correct? And then what is that? Is that an emperor, or is that a king, or is that what is that first consul?
At least in theory, it's supposed to be kind of like
No, keep going. I just wanted to check. Keep going. I just wanted to check and make sure the recording's good.
All right. Like, if you remember the Roman Republic, how they were run by two consuls, Napoleon is with his first title saying that, hey, I'm kind of like that, kind of like a president, but like I'm the chief of them.
Okay.
Then he gets his title changed in like 1802 or something. He gets this title changed consul for life.
Hmm.
Then just like
who changes the title?
him with the support of like some other government people.
Okay, does he have France is still a Catholic nation, right? So does he have the support of the Pope, or does he even need the support of the Pope?
This is a very interesting issue. Before the revolution, before the revolution, France was a deeply Catholic nation.
Okay.
But the part of the Enlightenment was secularism and the idea that you can have these new religions that are based off of rationalism, as they would call it.
Okay.
Robespierre was infamous for creating a new religion called the Cult of Reason, and some of Robespierre's political rivals, namely ones who had a similar ideology but were still political rivals, created another cult. I believe it was called the Cult of Logic. So the
Cult of Logic. So is this a form of secular humanism? Or they're atheist and they believe you can reason everything around you? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the main difference between
what year is this that we're talking about?
So with Robespierre is like 1790s.
Okay.
So
was Robespierre an atheist, or were a lot of these revolutionaries, they were atheists? It wasn't just a revolution against the established ruling class. It was also a revolution against the church.
Yeah, church lands were seized. A lot of people started getting mad at priests, except for in this one region in Western France that had a counter-revolution. The main difference between Robespierre's cult and the Cult of Logic is that Robespierre actually believed that you needed to like create like this deity that people can look up to for hope and order and stuff. So Rozier is just like kind of like deism, except like he has these great festivals that are based off of like the ones the Greek pagans would have.
Okay.
And then the Cult of Logic is like, no, you don't need a god, and we're just going to be completely rational.
Okay, so they were atheistic, whereas Robespierre was trying to, I guess, resurrect some pagan beliefs that were from the pre-Christian era.
Or his festivals resembled that. In fact, he was infamous for on Bastille Day having this like big, massive festival where he dressed up like Zeus, and they had all this stuff.
Oh, so it was specifically based on the Greek gods rather than the Gauls who resided in France.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the main point with Rozier was like, you need at least some deity. So he comes up with like this deity who's supposed to like watch over people and judge people who are counter-revolutionaries or whatever.
Oh, so it wasn't based in any kind of historical.
It
wasn't a historical Greek god or anything like that. It was just something he set up. He said, "Oh, I think this is going to be fitting for our political environment. Let me come up with this god and then push that on everybody." And did people accept that, or did they tell him he was nuts?
So the general populace, the uneducated people, they were like, "Okay, I guess this is what we're doing." The people in the Committee of Public Safety were divided, to say the least.
Okay, what were they divided on? Were some of them did some of them remain Christian, or were they into the Cult of Logic, or what were
some of them were Cult of Logic, some of them were Cult of Reason. For the most part, Christians were not very liked by the Committee of Public Safety.
Okay.
And then
were they openly persecuted? Like, were they beheaded or anything like that, or were they simply just left alone? Well, you said they took church property, but
priests were the most persecuted.
Okay.
Because
were they murdered by the?
Mainly because they were part of the First Estate.
Okay.
Christians themselves, they were just pressured, from what I understand. Maybe if they got particularly influential or Rozier's paranoia flared up, stuff would happen.
Okay, so the common somebody who's not clergy in any way, but just a faithful who goes to church on Sundays, they would say, well, you now need to accept this new God we've created, or join the Cult of Reason, but you're not a Christian anymore. Is that sort of the thing?
Yeah, kind of, except at the same time, like, because France was deeply Catholic before, they were also at the same time kind of acceptant accepting of like Protestants and Jews.
Hmm.
Like at least on paper, they made these laws of religious tolerance for Protestants and Jews
Hmm.
because I don't know. I guess just to spite the Catholics or whatever.
Oh, I see. Okay, you're saying somebody like Robespierre came up with this simply as he saw these are competing factions. The Protestants, he could bring in Protestants and Jews. He could bring them to compete, or he could support them to compete with the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Is that so? Was that the idea? So that none of those become too powerful?
That's my understanding. I mean, it's not like it was that influential. Combined, the Protestants and Jews at this point in French history made up like 2 or 3% of the population.
Oh, really?
Since most of the Huguenots were gone and Jews.
Most of the Huguenots had left for America by this point.
Yeah, or died.
Or died. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, because remember there were all those massacres under the reign of previous monarchs. But...
Okay. Yeah. But what year are we talking about now?
So we're still talking about 1790s when we're talking about these like all this cult stuff.
Okay.
The Directory is a bit more tolerant of like Christianity and stuff, but like some people are like still like deists or whatever. Deism is very prevalent among the more wealthy part of the Enlightenment. Is a theme you'll often see when you're looking at the Enlightenment.
There, and then what was the connection between America at that time? Because weren't some of the maybe somebody like Thomas Jefferson may have been considered to be a deist.
Yeah, because like a lot.
You think there was a connection there between France and America?
Yeah, I mean, like I know Benjamin Franklin like helped write the Declarations of Right and Man and Citizen, and a lot of founding fathers did go to France at some point or another, especially during like the earliest parts of the revolution, like around the time of the tennis court oath or the storming of the Bastille, or just like leading up to the flight of Varennes and the execution of Louis and Marie.
Okay. Do you know what any of their thoughts are? For example, Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin. Did they support sort of these waves of mass murder that Robespierre and his friends were engaging in, or did they stand opposed to that?
I haven't studied this too thoroughly. I know at the very least they like the idea of like France turning into a republic. Thomas Jefferson, I recall, did not exactly like Rozier, and he hated Napoleon.
Okay. Was it because he viewed Napoleon as essentially another king?
Yes, that's exactly it. Because if we go back to Napoleon, he becomes consul for life, and then in 1804 he becomes emperor. And one of the hallmarks of Napoleon's rule is bringing back Catholicism. Because what Robespierre did is often called de-Christianization, because they were basically removing Christianity from French culture, at least trying to. Like I forgot to mention this, but they even went so far as to change the French calendar to a new one that started in 1792 on the storming of the Bastille, had like 10 months or 10 or 12 months of 3 weeks with 10 days each week. It was created as a mixture of rationalist efficiency and just trying to make it so that there's not 7 days, so that Christians can be like, hey, which day is the 7th day again?
Oh, I see. Okay. So they wanted to change the length of the week, and then it was specifically designed as an anti-Christian measure.
And they gave all the months like new names that were like based off of like French words or revolutionary words. Like I think one of them was just like called like one of them was called like Liberty Month or something.
Okay.
So
and did they what year did they make? Did they call that year 1 or year 0?
Yeah, they called 1792 the first year of the new calendar.
Year 1. Okay, that's a little bit like the Maoists, weren't they? Didn't they call it year 0 when they tried to essentially rearrange their whole entire society?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And they were also atheist and just mass murdered essentially everybody they didn't agree with. So there's some sort of similarities there.
But anyways, 1804, 2 important events happen. Napoleon is crowned emperor, and Napoleon makes a deal with the Pope called the Concordat, which is basically The deal is that Napoleon will reverse the Christianization, but the French branch of the Catholic Church has to be under a new organization, which is sometimes called by historians the Gallican Church, named after a movement that rose during Louis XIV's reign, and which was the idea that France should control its own church. The Gallicanism is an older idea. In fact, I think it can even be traced all the way back to the Protestant Reformation and the Catholic Reformation.
So who was in charge of the Gallican Church
then? The Gallican Church was controlled by the Gallican Church under Napoleon's reign was basically just another ministry of the government, like the Ministry of Finance or the.
Okay, so Napoleon was the head of the church. Is that correct?
Because
he held authority over a minister who reported to him.
Yeah, maybe not in the same way that Henry VIII took the.
That's exactly where I was going with this.
Henry VIII
were they modeling it after England and the Anglican?
I don't think so, because Henry VIII, he takes the title Supreme Governor of the Church. The monarchy of England still holds this title to this day.
Right, and he has his own archbishop that is under him.
Yeah,
King is first, archbishop is under him. Okay, that's what I was wondering.
And the archbishop
Napoleon was trying to structure a similar arrangement.
Yeah, but what Napoleon wanted to do was turn the church into a secular ministry whose job it was to handle religious matters. So what he would do was he would have the church do things like it could only read papal bulls if they were approved by Napoleon. It had to read certain French decrees sent by Napoleon.
Okay, so essentially they still recognized the Pope coming from Rome or coming from the Vatican. They recognized him, but Napoleon gave himself veto power over things that the Pope may issue. That's an interesting setup. And so how did that go? Did that work well for him?
I mean, the Pope and Napoleon's relationship varied from, oh yay, finally we get Catholicism back in France, to just strained, to the point where in 1809 Napoleon was excommunicated, and Napoleon responded by putting the Pope under house arrest in Paris.
Oh, really? Huh. Interesting. So he was excommunicated, and then what happened from there? Was he ever reinstated into the church, or did he simply say, "Well, I'll form my own church. I don't care if you excommunicate me."
I don't recall what happened with his excommunication, but that was in 1809.
Okay.
In 1804, the Concordat signed, and what you have to understand about Napoleon creating this Gallican Church is that Napoleon was considered by modern historians to be a cynical pragmatist. He wasn't truly a believer in Christianity. In fact, he had many mistresses. But Napoleon believed that you needed a god because in order for a society to function, you need certain hierarchies whose justice may be arguable, and that the only way to convince a person, like a normal peasant, that someone should have the right to be higher, significantly higher in this hierarchy than them, is to tell them things like, oh, it's only like this because God ordered it to be. Oh, don't worry, in the kingdom of heaven, the first will be last and the last will be first. Don't worry, when you die, it'll all be better.
So do you think that's true? So this, I guess this claim that Napoleon was not actually a faithful Christian, he didn't really truly practice the faith, he simply saw the faith as a tool that he could use as a mechanism of control over his population, and he could make the argument that he had divine right to.
Or he didn't necessarily use divine right. In fact, at his coronation, the Pope was going to, crown him like the way the Pope would crown Charlemagne. But then, just as the Pope is lowering the crown, Napoleon snatches the crown out of the Pope's hands, puts it on himself, then grabs his wife and crowns her as Empress himself. And the Pope just stands there stunned, like, what the heck happened here?
So, I mean, he may not have used the term divine right, but he's essentially is essentially acting in a manner where you're saying, if he's saying to people lower in the social hierarchy, he's saying this is ordained by God, that I am at a higher rank than you, or somebody else is at a higher rank than you. I mean, essentially that flows from the same kind of idea as divine, right? So maybe he just didn't use the term because he said, oh, I'm not really a king, I'm not really an emperor. Although it sounds like in this case he actually said, well, I am the emperor now.
Yeah.
I'm above a king. I can, a king maybe has to get coronated by the Pope. Well, I can just grab it and do it myself. I don't even need the Pope. It sounds like he's actually kicked him. He's actually pushed, or believes himself to be up a notch above the kings. Okay, so when he does that, so what is the response? I would expect the Pope and the other kings in Europe would probably not be very happy about somebody like that. But what? So is that correct? Was there some sort of reaction to what he was
like
doing?
everyone basically? So basically, Napoleon is super successful. He's fighting back Austria and Prussia. So every monarch in Europe hates him.
Okay, so they hate him.
And
do they submit to him out of fear, or they all just want to gang up on him and take this guy out?
This is where we get into the coalitions, because the European powers form what's called coalitions, which were basically temporary alliances that were basically agreements to say, hey, I know we've been rivals before, but this Napoleon guy is scary. We need to team up against him. And the first and second coalitions were massive wins for Napoleon. And admittedly he had some help. Like, for example, him and Russia basically divided up Prussia's territory, with Russia taking Poland and Napoleon creating the Confederation of the Rhine, which was yet another puppet republic with Napoleon as the protector. Just instead of in Italy like the other ones, this was in Germany.
Okay.
Yeah. Napoleon also invades Spain, which is one of the places where the cracks begin to show in Napoleon's reign. So Napoleon invades Spain. He quickly overthrows the King of Spain, and the King of Spain is kicked out.
Okay.
And
what does he do with the king? Does the king get exiled, or does he keep the king there as sort of a puppet governor?
He wants to catch the king, but the king escapes. But Napoleon doesn't want to keep the current king of Spain anyway. Instead, he installs his brother, Joseph Bonaparte, on the throne of Spain.
Okay.
It's also important.
Is his brother loyal to him?
Yes, his brother loves him, though his brother doesn't trust his own ability to be king.
He doesn't. His brother does not trust Napoleon, or his brother does not believe in himself.
Yeah, Joseph doesn't really want to be king. Like, even though Napoleon has been like, "Yay, you're my brother, I love you. I'm going to give you Naples in Spain." Joseph's like, thanks.
This is too much for me.
Yeah, but Napoleon's like, no, you'll do fine. You'll do fine. Just.
Well, you said he loved Napoleon. He was loyal to him, so maybe that was something that Napoleon placed a lot of value on, was loyalty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Napoleon also tried to do a similar thing with Portugal, though British intervention made it not the easiest task.
Okay, so at this point he's going around taking over southern and western Europe, it sounds like, and then he's also making a lot of enemies in the process. So
yeah.
So what happens then? Does he overextend himself to the point where he's so weak he can be attacked easily, or what?
I mean, so here's the first thing that happens. So Napoleon understands that Britain is very powerful navally. He tried to do this maneuver where he lured the British fleet out of the English Channel and then sent his own fleet to invade the British Isles, but that did not work. So what Napoleon does is he goes to Egypt. He sends his army to Egypt with the hopes of taking over the British East India.
How do they get there? Do they march there, or do they go there by boat?
I think they just take boats.
Okay, they take boats from.
They go to
Egypt.
Okay. They go to Egypt. The Ottomans, who are kind of the rulers of Egypt, they don't know what to do. So before Napoleon, France was pragmatically allied to the Ottomans.
Okay, and why does he go to Egypt? I didn't realize he went to Egypt. Why does he go there? Is he trying to create another Roman Empire where he controls the whole Mediterranean region?
His goal is to get to the British colonies in Asia and Africa.
Oh, okay. He wants to. This is all about getting to Britain, even though England is right across the channel, or England is right across the channel from France. He's going to go all the way down to Egypt just to harass the British Empire.
Yeah, because he can't get across the English Channel because the British Navy is just so darn strong. It's like the strongest navy in the world at this point in history. So Napoleon, his strategy is to go for the British colonies. Here's the thing: the Ottomans, they don't know how to react, and they can't tell if Napoleon's invading Egypt or just passing through or what.
And what was he doing?
I think he was just passing through because he really wanted to get to like India to take down British Raj.
Wow. Okay.
But the Ottomans are just like, okay. The governor of Egypt is like, sure. Napoleon tries to get all like buddy with the governor of Egypt, and the governor of Egypt's like, yay.
Oh, so Napoleon went here himself. He wasn't remaining in France. He actually went with his soldiers down to.
Oh yeah, that was one of the things that made him popular with the army. He would He would fight with them.
Oh, okay. So that. Oh, yeah. I could imagine that would make them immediately loyal. He's not just this guy sitting up in a castle somewhere giving out orders. He actually comes out in the field with them.
Yeah. He tries to get all buddy with the governor of Egypt, but even after some friendly relations, the governor is eventually repulsed. So a mixture of the governor of Egypt being angry at Napoleon and a naval battle where the British defeat the French Navy in the Nile River under the leadership of a guy who's come to be known in history books. His name is Admiral Horatio Nelson.
Of course.
Yeah. So.
Well, how did the British Navy get down to the Nile? What were they doing down there?
They were following Napoleon.
Oh, so they knew he was going there. Okay, so they're following him. Okay.
Yeah. So,
and then so what happens from there? So does Napoleon go back to France after this?
Yeah, he comes back. He goes back to France. He does do some stuff with Egyptian art, like you know how the Sphinx has that broken nose. That's Napoleon. And he also you know how we in the West.
What, he wanted the nose as a souvenir?
I don't remember what the story with that was.
Okay.
Here's what I do remember the story with was basically before Napoleon, people were just like, it's Egypt, it's just another Muslim country, who cares? But Napoleon, when he's traveling through Egypt, he gets exposed to all this Egyptian culture, and not just Egyptian culture, but like Egyptian archaeology and stuff. So this is actually where the Western myth of like the mummy comes from, because Napoleon takes some mummy sarcophaguses and some other Egyptian art with him when he goes back to France after getting kicked out of Egypt, and the French people just eat this up. And after the fall of Napoleon, so does the rest of Europe, because France keeps this art.
Okay, so he goes back. His military campaign is not successful, but his cultural awareness is increased by he learns something about the Egyptian culture and wants to bring it back with him.
Yeah.
Okay, so then what happens there? What's next? So the British Navy repelled him.
Yeah.
What does he want to do next?